Adam Sparks of the Knoxville News Sentinel, and John Adams, by the way, who has obviously been a regular guest on the show in the past, both have articles up in Knox News this morning about what Tennessee having to deal with the upcoming House settlement on revenue sharing. Now, let's remember, this House settlement, when it comes to revenue sharing, deals with something very specific. And that specific thing is allowing schools to pay players directly, which is about $21 million they're going to have. They're going to have to set some of that aside for increased scholarship limits and things like that. So it'll be roughly $18.5, $19 million to divvy up among sports. Tennessee has a good problem to have. This money is going to be more difficult for them to divvy out than other schools because they've got so many sports that deliver. Tony Vitello can say he deserves more than your typical baseball program gets because he won a national championship. Kim Caldwell can sell what she just did her first year as the Lady Vols head coach and what she's building. Rick Barnes can point out that he's the most successful coach in Tennessee men's basketball history. Football is football. With that in mind, how should Tennessee go about divvying up the direct revenue sharing money? That's going to be more difficult than you think, believe it or not. And we're going to say all the factors that should go into play with this. And it's brought to you by City Heating and Air, 50 years in East Tennessee, integrity matters, cityheatandair.com, as we play hot or cold right now. What are the factors that should go in to Danny White's decision-making over how to divvy up the direct revenue sharing money schools can pay to players? Hot or cold right now. First one, no factors. Only pay football players. Okay, I'm a little cold on that. I'll be honest. I'm a little cold on that because I think you have to do a little bit of basketball. One is a revenue driver. And then the other small sports, particularly at Tennessee, that are very successful, like women's basketball and baseball, there's a pride with Tennessee that is not there with other schools that do generate other forms of profit when they are successful. So I say no on that. Only pay football and men's basketball players. I'm still cold on it. I'm sympathetic to it because those are the only revenue generators. But again, for those who don't know, the Lady Vol fan base has a deep contingency in Knoxville that's actually different from the football and men's basketball fan base. And they help play a role in helping to really propel Tennessee to new heights when the Lady Vols program is doing well. And given how much ESPN and national media now talks about women's basketball, I don't think you can just let that go by the wayside. Now, maybe pay just those three sports and then leave baseball out because I don't think baseball elevates you that much. I think Tennessee uniquely has a baseball culture, but you can't discount that baseball culture either because also the College World Series is one of the most fun moments in sports. So you can't put a direct value on trying to pay baseball and women's basketball, but there is some value there. Factor in revenue generated by sports to determine how much to pay each sport. I'm hot on that. I don't think you can ignore revenue generation. Okay. I mean, I think you do have to pay sports you do have to pay based on who generates the most money. Pay every sport equally. No, cold on that. You can't do that. Sorry. You got to be realistic. You got to win and you just can't do that. Okay. Now here is an interesting one. Pay based on what other SEC teams are doing in each sport. I think that should be a factor too. I think what other SEC teams are doing in each sport should be a factor, quite honestly, because the whole point is to make sure you don't lose a competitive advantage. If you can divvy up funds in a way where you can keep it a competitive advantage, that becomes a factor. So I'm hot on that. I think that's a really, really good idea. Now, here's a big question. Factor in success. Should Tony Vitello say that he deserves a little bit more money than other baseball programs, even if it's not a revenue sport, because of what baseball has done generating revenue over the course of, shall we say, over the course of the last few years? Look, man, I don't think you do it mostly based on success. I think that is a very small factor, but I think you gotta somewhat take it into account, believe it or not. I actually do. I think you somewhat have to take success into account. So with that in mind, yeah, I actually probably would factor in success, as crazy as that sounds when you think about how much revenue matters. And I still say that revenue matters, but I just don't think you can ignore success at the same time. It's not the biggest thing. It's actually a very small thing, but it's there, and success has to matter. So with that in mind, yeah, yep, I'm going to factor in success. So the last one, and then we'll have a poll question up. But first, hot or cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. It's going to take NIL into account. Hot or cold brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. 50 years in East Tennessee. Integrity matters. CityHeatandAir.com.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. There's your best.
All right, the last one, hot or cold, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, NIL. An understanding that NIL will increase with more success on the field. So focus on that more than revenue and sell the point that NIL opportunities will outweigh directly what players are getting in revenue. I'm hot on that. I think there is a communication level that you can do if Tennessee gets out in front of the NIL market, where you could sell what NIL is what NIL will do for you if you have success on the field, and how what they're doing will allow for more success on the field. And that's why maybe you could accept a pay cut in something like women's basketball even. I mean, we know this now. Women's basketball players are much more marketable than the revenue they generate on a national scale if they have success. So I think you could sell that probably most to women's basketball, more to that than even baseball, because baseball players don't necessarily become that marketable. But women's basketball players, I mean, ESPN covers it so religiously that I think there will be endorsement deals on the table in women's basketball that wouldn't be there. So you can maybe sell cutting the funding for that more than other sports, even though that would look bad for optics if you cut it for women's basketball and not for baseball. So I'm setting up the poll question now. How should Vols base their payments to players across sports when the House settlement comes up? And say revenue generated. We'll go success. What other SEC teams or what other teams are doing. And the last one, we will say, setting it up now, I'll say pay every sport equally. How about that? Now, I'll let you guys decide. So, how should Vols base their payments to players across all sports? That are about to be allowed. All right, sorry guys, I got a little slowed for a second. So I'm setting this up again. How should Vols base their payments to players that are about to be allowed across all sports? Revenue generated, success, what other teams are doing, or pay every sport equally? If I have to choose between those four, I'm going revenue generated. I'm going revenue generated. I understand the point you might want to make that success matters, but I'm going revenue generated. Second is what other teams are doing. I would also base it on what other teams are doing, because the whole point of paying these players is about the competitive advantage you can get or the competitive disadvantage you can avoid. With that in mind, I think that you really have to focus on what other teams are doing. I know that doesn't seem popular, but you have to focus on what other teams are doing. And as of right now, with just 6 votes in, the votes are picking up. That's the one vote no one's taken into account. But guys, this direct revenue to players, these direct payments, it's based on what other teams are doing. It's based on what the market calls for. And that's how you maintain, because this is all about maintaining a competitive advantage or avoiding a competitive disadvantage. So I just got to be honest. I don't know how you can justify not factoring in what other teams are doing. As of right now, for the poll question, revenue generated is the leader by a large majority. 62% say they should base their payments based on revenue generated per sport. 12% say divide it equally between success, what other teams are doing, and pay every sport equally. Yeah, you can't pay every sport equally, guys. I'm sorry. Rowing does not deserve the same payment to players as football. Now, there is a Title IX issue that's going to have to be addressed when this House settlement happens. You would theoretically think because the settlement came from the House that it wouldn't, because the Supreme Court would be interpreting a law written by Congress. This is a settlement with Congress. So taking that into account, theoretically, the Supreme Court could say, well, Congress is carving out an exception, a clear exception for NCAA athletes with Title IX. They're carving out a clear exception to Title IX with this direct revenue payments to schools. But it's going to be tricky to make that case, guys. It's going to be tricky. There are lawyers that are much smarter than me that could probably figure that out. But I'm telling you, it's not as easy as you probably think. So I think you really got to be careful with how you're approaching this, and they got to be careful with how they're approaching this. Okay, so just watch out. But in general, it's got to be about the revenue. You can't pay everybody equally in every sport equally. That's just an insane idea. Okay, I'm sorry. It's just totally insane to do that.